There's a 27-second video that Atlanta police don't want you to see. Not because it doesn't exist, it does. A neighbor's Ring camera caught everything. But because what's on that footage is the kind of violence that stays with you long after you've watched it. A mother of 4 standing outside a home on a quiet Tuesday night. A figure in all white approaching. And then her voice. Please, I don't. The rest is gunfire. 10 shots. Point-blank range. The shooter's gun jams halfway through, and instead of stopping, instead of running, he fixes it and keeps going. Even after Courtney Reese collapses to the ground. Her 4 kids were inside that house. They heard everything. 3 months earlier, Courtney buried her younger sister, another victim of gun violence. Now her father would have to bury a second daughter. 2 sisters. 90 days. Both gone to bullets. What you're about to hear is the full story of what happened that night, what led up to it, and why a secret allegedly cost Courtney her life. What's going on, family? Welcome back to Unseen Stories. Before we get into today's case, I need you to understand something. What we're about to discuss is heavy. It involves domestic violence, gun violence, and the loss of life. If you're watching this with young ones around, you might want to come back to this one later. Today we're talking about Courtney Reese, a 32-year-old mother of 4 from Atlanta, Georgia. A woman whose life was taken on August 20, 2024, in one of the most cold-blooded acts of violence captured on camera. And the tragedy doesn't stop there. Just 3 months before Courtney was taken from this world, her family had already buried her younger sister to gun violence. 2 daughters. 1 father. 90 days apart. We're gonna walk through what happened that night, what led up to it, and what came after. We've got video evidence, witness statements, and family testimony. But more than that, we need to talk about what this case teaches us. About domestic violence, about recognizing danger, and about the cost of secrets. So if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. And if you've been rocking with us, you already know what it is. Let's get into it. Courtney Reese was born and raised in the Atlanta area. At 32 years old, she was a mother to 4 children. 3 daughters, ages 13, 9, and 6, and an 11-year-old son. Those kids were her world. Everything she did was for them. People who knew Courtney described her the same way. Her older sister Lena said,
"She was everybody's hype man. She was everybody's cook. It's a party. It's a celebration like she would have had any other day. She didn't deserve this. Her kids will miss her. Her sisters, her brother, her dad, her mom. Her life was cut short, but the children still are here. They still
Courtney
gotta
was
be
a single mother working hard to provide for her kids in Conyers, Georgia. She was involved in their schooling, their activities, their lives. She showed up. She was present. That's the kind of mother she was. But in May 2024, tragedy hit the family in a way that nobody saw coming. Courtney's younger sister, 29-year-old Symmetria McCord, was shot and killed in Decatur, Georgia. Symmetria was an Army veteran. She had just started her dream job as a nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital. 4 days into the job, she went to a family gathering, a repast to honor someone who had passed, and gunfire erupted from nearby houses. Symmetria was an innocent bystander. She wasn't involved in whatever was happening. She was just there. And just like that, she was gone. Can you even process that? You work hard, you serve your country, you finally land your dream job, and 4 days later, you're killed at a family event by stray bullets? You're there to mourn with your family, and you become the next person they have to mourn? The family was devastated. Courtney's father, Travis Edwards, was drowning in grief. Losing a child, there's no words for that pain. There's no handbook. There's no timeline for healing. And he had no idea that in exactly 3 months, almost to the day, he would be burying another daughter. After Symmetria's death, Courtney made a decision. She looked at her 4 children and she looked at what had just happened to her sister, and she decided right then, I'm going to straighten out my life. I'm going to distance myself from anything or anyone that might bring harm to me or my children. She'd already lost her sister to gun violence. She wasn't going to let anything else put her family at risk. Part of that decision meant ending her relationship with a man named Derek Rankins. Derek Rankins was 33 years old. According to reports, he and Courtney had been in some kind of romantic relationship. The exact timeline isn't fully clear from the information available, but what we do know is that Derek was no stranger to trouble. He'd recently been released from jail, and according to family members who spoke out on social media, he'd been actively searching for Courtney online. His Instagram handle was reportedly Big Derek Rankins, and people close to Courtney said he was using social media to try to find her. He wanted to locate her. He needed to find her. What? According to Courtney's family members who spoke out on social media after her death, Courtney had discovered something about Derek. Something he allegedly wanted to keep hidden. One person claiming to be Courtney's cousin posted online, "Y'all speaking on and don't know anything. Dude got caught having relations with another man. My little cousin exposed him. He was her boyfriend." Now, let me be clear about something. These allegations were never officially confirmed by police. At the time of the initial investigation, details about the suspect were scarce. No arrests had been made yet. We're talking about claims made by family members on social media during a time of tremendous grief and anger. But Courtney's family was certain about who was in that Ring camera video. They knew it was Derek Rankins. And they believed he took Courtney's life because she had exposed what he wanted no one to know. Whether that specific claim is true or not, we can't say definitively. What we can say is that Courtney ended her relationship with Derek. And according to her family, she told people why. Word spread. And when Derek allegedly found out that people knew his business, something in him changed. Chief Darren Schierbaum of the Atlanta Police Department would later describe this case clearly. He said, "Back on August the 20th, the city experienced the loss of one of our citizens in a domestic violence-motivated homicide. We lost on that day Courtney Reese. Domestic violence. That's what this was officially classified as. Someone who knew Courtney. Someone who had been in her life. Someone who made a choice that would destroy multiple families. We don't know every detail about what happened in the days and weeks before August 20th. But we know Derek was looking for Courtney. We know that according to family members, he'd been using social media trying to track her down. And we know Courtney was trying to protect herself and her children. She'd made the decision to cut ties with Derek. She was building a stable life. She was focused on her kids. But domestic violence doesn't always respect boundaries. It doesn't care about restraining orders or blocked phone numbers or changed addresses. When someone is determined to find you, when someone feels entitled to you, when someone can't handle the loss of control, that's when things become most dangerous. Experts will tell you, the most dangerous time for someone in a domestic violence situation is when they're trying to leave or right after they've left. That's when the abuser realizes they're losing control. That's when some people snap. Courtney did what we tell people to do. She left. She distanced herself. She tried to protect her family. But on August 20th, Derek found her. Let me set the scene for you. It's a Tuesday night, around 9 p.m. Springside Drive is a quiet residential street in southeast Atlanta, in a neighborhood called Glenrose Heights. It's tucked between Cleveland Avenue and Mount Zion Road. Families are inside their homes. Kids are getting ready for bed. It's a normal night. The kind of night where nothing bad is supposed to happen. Then gunfire shatters the peace. A neighbor's Ring camera is recording. And what that camera captures in the next 27 seconds will become the most important piece of evidence in a murder investigation. The video shows a figure dressed entirely in white. White hoodie, white pants, approaching Courtney Reese outside a home. You can hear Courtney's voice. She knows what's about to happen. You can hear the fear, the desperation. She's pleading, "Please, I don't." And then the shooting starts. The figure raises a gun and fires at Courtney. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. The gun jams. There's a mechanical failure. The weapon stops working. For a split second, there's a choice to be made. Derek Rankins, because that's who police would later identify as the shooter, he could have stopped right there. He could have walked away. The universe, God, fate, whatever you want to call it, gave him an out. A moment to reconsider. A moment to stop. He didn't take it. He cleared the jam, fixed the weapon, and he kept firing. Not one shot, not two. According to police, 10 shots, point-blank range. And even after Courtney collapsed to the ground, defenseless, unable to fight back, unable to run, he kept shooting. Then he ran, disappeared into the night. Left Courtney there, her life slipping away on that porch. Now here's the part that's going to stay with you. Inside that house, just feet from where their mother was fighting for her life, were Courtney's 4 children. A 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old. They didn't see what happened. But they heard it. They heard their mother screaming. They heard the gunshots, 10 of them. They heard the silence that came after. Can you imagine being a child, trapped inside your own home, listening to your mother being harmed and not being able to do anything about it? Can you imagine the helplessness? The terror? The confusion? That's the trauma those 4 children will carry for the rest of their lives. That's what they'll remember about August 20th, 2024. Not a normal Tuesday. Not a regular night. The night they heard their mother take her last breath. When Atlanta police officers arrived at the scene on Springside Drive, they found Courtney lying outside, suffering from multiple injuries from gunfire. The severity of what had happened was immediately apparent. Despite their swift response, despite everything the paramedics and officers tried to do, it was too late. Courtney Reese, a mother of 4, a sister, a daughter, someone who brought joy to everyone around her, was gone. The neighborhood, once a place of comfort and safety for Courtney and her children, was now a scene marked by unimaginable violence. Yellow tape, police cars, investigators. The kind of scene you see on the news and never think will happen on your block. The next day, August 21st, a critical piece of evidence came to light. That neighbor who had the Ring camera turned over the 27-second video clip to police. The footage was brief, but it captured the final moments of Courtney's life in horrifying detail. Atlanta Police Chief Darren Schierbaum made it clear from the very beginning what this case was about. He said, "Back on August the 20th, the city experienced the loss of one of our citizens in a domestic violence-motivated homicide. We lost on that day Courtney Reese. This wasn't random. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. This was domestic violence. This was someone who knew Courtney, someone who had been in her life, deciding that if he couldn't have control over her, nobody would have anything." The very next day, August 21st, less than 24 hours after the incident, Atlanta police issued an arrest warrant for Derek Rankins for murder. They made it clear to the public that this man was extremely dangerous and should not be approached. Chief Schierbaum stated. The very next day, the Atlanta Police Department issued arrest warrants for Derek Rankins, who we knew to be very dangerous and posing a threat to this community. But Derek was gone. He'd vanished after the incident. And for 7 days he was out there somewhere, a man who had just taken someone's life in cold blood, armed and on the run. While police were searching for Derek, Courtney's family was trying to process the unthinkable. Her older sister Lena was devastated. She posted a message online that shows the raw, unfiltered pain of losing someone you love. "I just want my sister back. I can't stop driving and crying." That video, hearing her plead to that monster and gasping for her last breath. "I just keep replaying it. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to be around anyone. I just want to curl up and cry all day. I miss hearing her call my phone teasingly saying, 'Stupid, what are you doing?' And me replying, 'I'm at work, girl.' And her saying, 'Oh, I forgot. She had just called me yesterday morning talking about being downtown. We were laughing about what was going on down there. If I had known yesterday was going to be the last time I talked to her, I would have stayed on the phone longer, but I told her I was at work and I'd call her back once my store cleared.'" Lord Jesus, why? Read that again. Really let it sink in. A sister who will never get another phone call. Who will never hear Courtney's voice on the other end, teasing her, calling her stupid, in that playful way siblings do. Who has to live with the fact that their last conversation was cut short because she was at work. How many times have we done that? Told someone we love, "I'll call you back, I'm busy"? For Lena, later, never came. That callback never happened. And now she has to carry that for the rest of her life. And here's what makes it even worse. Courtney's father, Travis Edwards, was still grieving his daughter Symmetria. He'd buried one daughter just 3 months earlier. He was still trying to figure out how to breathe, how to wake up every morning knowing his child was gone. And now he had to bury another one. 2 daughters. 90 days. Both taken by bullets. What do you even say to a parent going through that? What words of comfort exist for that kind of pain? For Courtney's family, those 7 days between the incident and Derek's capture must have felt like an eternity. Your daughter, your sister, your children's mother has been taken from this world, and the person who did it is still out there somewhere. Still breathing. Still free. But the Atlanta Police Department wasn't sitting idle. They knew they needed to move fast. They knew Derek was armed and dangerous. They knew he'd already shown he was willing to take a life. So they brought in the specialist. The United States Marshals Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force got involved. This is a specialized unit that includes U.S. Marshals, Atlanta police investigators, Georgia State Patrol officers, and other law enforcement agencies from across the region. These are the people who track down the most dangerous fugitives in the country. These are the officers who go after murder suspects, violent offenders, people who are on the run and willing to do anything to stay free. According to the U.S. Marshal for the Northern District of Georgia, these task forces serve about 2,000 warrants a year. That results in approximately 200 arrests of individuals wanted for taking someone's life annually. Derek Rankins was now one of those targets. The task force included an 18-year veteran from the Atlanta Police Department's fugitive unit. These weren't rookies. These weren't inexperienced officers. These were seasoned investigators who knew exactly what they were walking into. They knew Derek was armed. They knew he'd already used that weapon. They knew he had nothing to lose. So they moved carefully, tactically. They gathered intelligence. They tracked leads. They narrowed down his location. And on August 27th, exactly 1 week after Courtney's life was taken, the task force got the break they needed. Derek had been tracked to a house on Linden Lane in Stockbridge, Henry County. It's a neighborhood called Swan Lake Estates. Quiet suburban area. Tree-lined streets. The kind of place where people raise their families. The kind of place where you wouldn't expect a violent manhunt to end. But Derek was there. And he was watching. Waiting. The moment law enforcement officers approached that house on Linden Lane to serve the warrant for taking Courtney's life, Derek Rankins made his choice. He opened fire from inside the house. Bullets tore through the walls. Officers scrambled for cover. And in that exchange of gunfire, one of those bullets struck the 18-year veteran from the Atlanta Police Department's fugitive unit. He was hit in the arm. Here's an officer who woke up that morning, kissed his family goodbye, and went to work to bring justice for Courtney Reese. To get someone dangerous off the streets. To make the community safer. And he ended up fighting for his own life. Chief Shearbaum described what happened. At that location, Mr. Rankins opened fire on members of the fugitive task force. During that exchange of gunfire, a member of this department, an 18-year veteran assigned to our fugitive unit, was injured. The officer's fellow task force members acted immediately. They returned fire to cover their wounded colleague. They pulled him out of the line of danger. And a Henry County Sheriff's Office helicopter was called in to airlift him to Grady Memorial Hospital. The same hospital where Courtney's sister Symmetria had just started working before she was killed. The same hospital that was supposed to represent hope and new beginnings for that family. Now it was treating an officer who'd been shot trying to bring justice for Courtney. Chief Shearbaum said, "Thankfully, those injuries are not life-threatening, and I thank God for having the hand of protection over our officers today and the phenomenal staff of Grady Hospital for their work in providing medical care, which they continue to do behind us. Thank God that officer survived. Thank God he made it out of there. Because this could have easily been a story about two people losing their lives, Courtney and a police officer trying to bring her justice. After Derek shot that officer, he barricaded himself inside the house. He wasn't coming out. He'd made his choice. He was going to fight. Officers surrounded the residence. They set up a perimeter. They made sure no one else could get hurt. And then they waited. For the next 2 hours, there was a standoff. Police tried to communicate with Derek, tried to get him to surrender peacefully. But he wasn't talking. He wasn't negotiating. The Georgia State Patrol SWAT team was called in. These are the specialists trained for exactly this kind of situation. High-risk warrants, barricaded suspects, active threats. They deployed tear gas into the house, trying to force Derek out. Still nothing. Finally, the SWAT team made the decision to enter. They cleared the house room by room, moving tactically, making sure they weren't walking into another ambush. And when they got to the attic, they found Derek Rankins. He was deceased. A rifle was next to his body. Now here's the question that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had to answer. How exactly did Derek Rankins pass away? Was it during that initial exchange of gunfire when he shot the Atlanta police investigator? Did one of the officer's bullets strike him then? Or did Derek make a choice up there in that attic while police were trying to get him out? The Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called in to conduct an independent investigation. That's standard procedure anytime an officer discharges their weapon. There has to be an outside agency looking at what happened to make sure everything was done properly. But to this day, there hasn't been a definitive public statement about exactly how Derek passed away in that house. What we do know is this: Derek Rankins never had to face a courtroom. He never had to sit in front of a jury. He never had to look Courtney's 4 children in the eye and explain why he chased down their mother and took her life while she begged him to stop. He never had to answer for what he did. And for some people that's justice. For others it's not enough. For Courtney's father, Travis Edwards, it was complicated. In a statement he said, "Honestly, this was the best outcome because this guy was a danger to others while on the run. I wish harm upon no one, but he deserves exactly what he got." That's not celebration. That's not satisfaction. That's exhaustion. That's a father who has buried 2 daughters in 90 days, finding some small relief in knowing that Derek won't hurt anyone else. That no other family will have to go through what his family went through. While all of this was happening, the manhunt, the standoff, the resolution, Courtney's family and community were coming together to honor her memory. On August 23rd, just 3 days after Courtney's passing, friends and family gathered for a balloon release. They came together to mourn, yes, but also to celebrate. Because that's what Courtney would have wanted. Purple balloons filled the sky. Music played. People shared stories about the woman who brought so much light to their lives. Lena described it. It's a party. It's a celebration like she would have had any other day. Because that's who Courtney was. Even in passing, her family made sure to honor her the way she lived. With joy, with love, with community. People shared memories of Courtney cooking for everyone. Of her being the hype man, the person who made sure everybody felt good. Of her infectious smile and the way she could light up a room just by walking into it. But the most heartbreaking moment of that gathering came from the next generation. Courtney's 13-year-old daughter stood before her family and her younger siblings. A child. Just 13 years old. And she had to become the adult in that moment. She looked at her 11-year-old brother, her 9-year-old sister, her 6-year-old sister, and she made them a promise. "Don't worry, we got you for life." 13 years old. And she's now the one holding her family together. That little girl became the protector, the reassurance, the strength, all the things she learned from watching her mother. In an instant, her childhood was over. Replaced by a responsibility no child should have to carry. Replaced by a protective love that she inherited directly from Courtney. How does a 13-year-old process that? How does she go back to school, go back to normal life, when nothing will ever be normal again? A GoFundMe was set up to help cover Courtney's burial costs and to support her 4 children. The community rallied. People who never even knew Courtney donated because they were moved by her story. They were moved by the tragedy. They wanted to help those 4 kids who just lost everything. News outlets covered the case. Local reporters spoke with family members. Courtney's aunt shared memories with the media. She was a great mother, and we want them to have everything that we knew that she was going to do for them. Another family member said, "Courtney was joy. She was love. She was a protector. She was, a provider." That's the legacy Courtney left. Not the violence that took her life, but the love she gave while she was here. On August 29th, Courtney's homegoing service was held in Decatur, Georgia. Family, friends, and community members filled the space. They came to say goodbye to a woman whose life was stolen far too soon. They came to support those 4 children. They came to stand with Travis Edwards, a father who had now buried 2 daughters in 3 months. The service was a celebration of Courtney's life. People shared stories. They played her favorite music. They honored the woman she was, a devoted mother, a loving sister, a friend who showed up for people. But underneath all that celebration was a devastating truth. Courtney should have been there. She should have been alive, raising her children, cooking for her family, being everyone's hype man. She was 32 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. And it was taken from her in 27 seconds by someone who claimed to care about her. After Derek was found deceased and the officer was recovering from his injuries, Atlanta Police Chief Darren Schierbaum held a press conference to update the public. He was joined by city officials, the U.S. Marshal for the Northern District of Georgia, sheriff's deputies, and other law enforcement leaders. Chief Schierbaum addressed the dangers that law enforcement faces every single day. "This is a dangerous job, and I'm so thankful men and women every day say yes to this profession to protect this city, this county, and communities across the region. We have seen 2 members of law enforcement in the past week and a half lose their life, and our prayers continue to go out to Paulding County and Carroll County. This is what we train for. We recruit men and women who have a quality to stand in the gap for their communities. We train weekly and regularly to make sure when an individual who poses harm to community doesn't want to go back to jail, that we can do so with the least risk to the citizens in the area, that individual or law enforcement. The U.S. Marshal for the Northern District of Georgia spoke about the partnership between different law enforcement agencies. The U.S. Marshal Service is comprised of a number of officers, in addition to certified U.S. Marshal deputies, but police officers and sheriff deputies from throughout the metro Atlanta area. Atlanta Police Department is a huge contributor to that task force, and we thank them for that. We could not do our job without their assistance, as well as the other law enforcement assistance. U.S. Marshals serve some 2,000 warrants a year that normally result in about 200 arrests of individuals for taking someone's life per year. This was one of those individuals that we wanted to get off of the street. We was able to do that successfully. We are so glad, and we are continuing to pray for the Atlanta officer that was wounded in this. A reporter asked Chief Schierbaum what message he had for perpetrators who don't respect law enforcement. He responded, "Our job is to teach everyone respect and to make sure justice is done. And for individuals that may think they're going to continue to break the law and place communities at risk, you see a strong coalition of law enforcement that stands behind me and that is present throughout our region, men and women of integrity who wear the uniform of law enforcement. We're going to take someone into custody, whoever they may be, however dangerous they may be, for the sake of our communities." Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens also spoke out after Courtney's case, calling domestic violence a national crisis. He urged everyone to stand up and say, "No more." But here's what I want to know. What does no more actually look like? What are we willing to do differently? Now we need to talk about the uncomfortable questions, the conversations that make people squirm. Because that's what Courtney's story demands from us. First, what do we do when someone we know is in a dangerous relationship? Courtney made the decision to leave Derek. According to her family, she recognized that he was trouble, especially after losing her sister to gun violence. She wanted safety. She wanted peace for herself and her children. She did what everyone tells you to do when you're in a bad situation. She left. But here's what they don't always tell you. Leaving is often the most dangerous time for someone in a domestic violence situation. Statistics show that a person is most at risk when they're trying to leave an abusive partner or right after they've left. Why? Because the abuser is losing control. And for some people, if they can't have control, they'd rather nobody have anything. So the question becomes, how do we support people who are trying to leave dangerous relationships? How do we create actual safety nets, not just advice? How do we recognize when someone is escalating from controlling behavior to actual violence? Because telling someone just leave isn't enough if we're not also making sure they have somewhere safe to go. If we're not making sure the person they're leaving doesn't have access to them. If we're not taking the threats seriously. Courtney left, and she still lost her life. So what do we do better? Second, what responsibility do we have when we learn someone's private information? According to Courtney's family, she learned something about Derek that he wanted kept private. And she told people. Whether those specific allegations are true or not, we can't confirm. They were never verified by police. But the question remains, when you learn something about someone, especially something they're hiding, what do you do with that information? Do you have the right to tell others? Do you have a responsibility to keep it to yourself? Where's the line between protecting yourself and exposing someone's private business? This isn't a simple answer. If someone's secret could put others in danger, that's one thing. If they're harming people, if they're being deceptive in ways that could hurt someone, that's different from just sharing gossip. But here's what we know for sure. Nobody deserves to lose their life over a secret. Nobody deserves to be harmed because they told the truth about someone. And if someone's response to being exposed is violence, that tells you everything you need to know about that person. Third, how do we address the shame that allegedly leads to violence? If the allegations about Derek are true, and again we can't confirm them, then we're looking at a situation where someone allegedly took another person's life because they were ashamed of who they were, because they couldn't live in their truth, because the fear of being exposed was greater than the value they placed on Courtney's life. That's deep. That's about internalized shame. That's about societal pressure. That's about what happens when people feel like they have to hide fundamental parts of themselves. And when that shame boils over, when it turns to rage, when it becomes violence, innocent people pay the price. How do we create communities where people can be honest about who they are without fear? How do we address the toxic attitudes that make people feel like they have to hide? How do we teach people that shame is not a reason to harm another human being? These aren't easy conversations, but Courtney's passing demands that we have them. Fourth, what do we do about gun violence in our communities? 2 sisters, 90 days, both taken by gunfire. Symmetria was struck by stray bullets at a family gathering. Courtney was shot by someone who, according to the police chief, had no business having a weapon in the first place. Chief Shearbaum himself said Derek Rankins shouldn't have had access to a firearm. So how did he get one? How do people who are dangerous, who have criminal records, who are fresh out of jail, still end up armed? We can talk about laws all day. We can debate policy. We can argue about rights and regulations. But at the end of the day, 2 sisters are gone. 4 children are growing up without their mother. A father buried 2 daughters in 3 months. A family will never be whole again. What are we actually willing to do differently to stop this from happening to someone else's family? Let's be very clear about what Courtney's passing actually cost. 4 children lost their mother. A 13-year-old girl had to stand in front of her siblings and promise them stability when her own world just fell apart. An 11-year-old boy will never hear his mama's voice again. A 9-year-old and a 6-year-old will grow up with gunshots as the last sound they associate with their mother. Those kids were inside that house. They heard everything. They'll carry that trauma for the rest of their lives. That's not something therapy can just fix. That's not something time can just heal. That's a wound that becomes part of who they are. A father buried 2 daughters in 90 days. Travis Edwards will never recover from that. You don't come back from burying your children. You don't move on. You just learn to carry it. You learn to wake up every morning knowing that 2 of your daughters are gone, and you somehow find a way to keep breathing. A sister will never get another phone call where Courtney teases her and says, "Stupid, what are you doing?" Lena will never laugh with her sister again about what's happening downtown. That last conversation, cut short because she was at work, will haunt her for the rest of her life. Every time her phone rings, there will be a split second where she forgets, where she thinks maybe it's Courtney, and then she'll remember, and she'll have to feel that loss all over again. A community lost someone who brought light, someone who made people feel welcome, someone who cooked for everybody, hyped everybody up, made everybody smile. Her children's schools lost a parent who showed up, who was involved. Her neighbors lost someone who made the block feel like home. Her friends lost the person who made sure everyone was good. And for what? Allegedly because of a secret, because of shame, because someone couldn't let Courtney live her life after she learned something about his. That's the cost. That's what's gone forever. That's what can never be replaced. One of the most important things we can take from Courtney's story is learning to recognize when a situation is becoming dangerous. Domestic violence doesn't usually start with physical harm. It starts with control, with isolation, with manipulation, with someone slowly taking away your autonomy, your connections, your sense of self. And when you try to take that back, when you try to leave, that's when things escalate. Some warning signs that a situation might turn violent. Someone who can't handle you ending the relationship. Someone who tracks you, follows you, shows up where you are uninvited. Someone who threatens you or people you love. Someone who destroys your property or hurts animals. Someone whose anger seems out of proportion to the situation. Someone who talks about harming themselves if you leave. Someone who has access to weapons and makes threats. If you see these signs in your own relationship or in someone else's, that's not the time to hope it gets better. That's the time to get help, to make a safety plan, to take it seriously. Because Courtney's family probably saw some of these signs. And they probably thought, it won't go that far. He won't actually do anything. Until he did. Courtney's case isn't unique. That's the devastating truth. Every day in this country, women are harmed or taken from this world by intimate partners. Current or former boyfriends, husbands, people who claim to love them. In the Black community specifically, we face higher rates of domestic violence. And we talk about it less. We're told to keep family business private. We're told not to air our dirty laundry. We're told to protect Black men from a system that already targets them. But at what cost? How many women have to lose their lives before we say enough is enough? Courtney's story is one that made the news because of the Ring camera video, because of the manhunt, because of the dramatic standoff. But there are countless other Courtneys whose stories never make headlines. Women who are harmed in their homes, in their cars, in parking lots, and nobody knows their names. We have to do better. As a community, as families, as friends, as bystanders who see warning signs and don't want to get involved. We have to create spaces where women can speak up without being told they're overreacting. Where they can leave without being told they're breaking up the family. Where they can get help without being shamed. Because staying silent, keeping secrets, protecting abusers, that costs lives. Let's talk about what happens next for those 4 kids. They're growing up without their mother. That's the obvious loss. But it goes deeper than that. They lost their sense of safety. Their home, the place that's supposed to be their sanctuary, is now associated with trauma. Every time they close their eyes, they might hear those sounds. Every time they're in that neighborhood, they might remember. They lost their stability. Courtney was their provider, their protector. Now someone else has to step up. Grandmother, aunt, father, whoever is caring for them now has to try to fill a hole that can't be filled. They lost their childhood. That 13-year-old who promised her siblings, "We got you for life?" She had to grow up in an instant. She had to become the strong one, the reassuring one, the parent figure. At 13, they're going to struggle with trust. How do you trust people? How do you trust relationships when you watch someone who supposedly cared about your mother take her life? They're going to struggle with anger. At Derek, yes, but also maybe at their mother for telling people about him. At the police for not protecting her. At God for letting this happen. At themselves for not being able to save her even though they were just kids. They're going to need therapy. They're going to need support. They're going to need people who understand trauma and don't just tell them to be strong or get over it. And they're going to need their community to show up. Not just with donations to the GoFundMe, though that helps, but with continued presence, with checking in, with making sure they're okay as the months and years go by and the news cameras leave and people move on to the next tragedy. Because for those 4 kids, this isn't a news story. This is the rest of their lives. Courtney Reese was failed. Let's just be honest about that. She was failed by a system that let a dangerous man access a weapon when he allegedly shouldn't have had one. She was failed by a culture that creates so much shame around certain topics that people would rather commit violence than be exposed. She was failed by the reality that leaving a dangerous relationship, doing what you're supposed to do, is often the most dangerous thing you can do. But Courtney was also loved. She was loved by her children, who she poured everything into, who she worked hard for, who she showed up for every single day. She was loved by her sister Lena, who described her as the life of the party, everyone's hype man. She was loved by her father Travis, who is somehow still standing after burying 2 daughters in one summer. She was loved by a community that showed up for her memorial, that donated to help her children, that released purple balloons in her honor, that made sure her name wouldn't be forgotten. And her legacy lives on in those 4 children. In that 13-year-old girl who promised her siblings, "We got you for life." In the strength they'll carry forward. In the love they learned from watching their mother. Courtney's story should make us uncomfortable. It should make us ask hard questions. It should make us look at the relationships around us differently. It should make us take warning signs more seriously. Because this could have been prevented. Maybe not easily. Maybe not simply. But somewhere along the line, there were moments where different choices, different interventions, different responses could have changed the outcome. And if we don't learn from Courtney's story, if we don't do something different, then her passing means nothing. And those 4 kids lose their mother for nothing. So I'm asking you directly, what are you willing to do differently? How are you going to show up for the people in your life who might be in danger? How are you going to have those uncomfortable conversations about domestic violence? How are you going to recognize the warning signs and actually do something about them? How are you going to teach the young men in your life that violence is never the answer to shame, to rejection, to loss of control? How are you going to support survivors instead of judging them? Because talking about Courtney's story in the comments, sharing this video, feeling sad for a few minutes, that's not enough. We need actual change. We need people to commit to doing better. Mayor Andre Dickens called domestic violence a national crisis. Chief Shearbaum talked about the dangers of the job. The U.S. Marshal talked about getting dangerous people off the streets. But what about us? What about our responsibility as a community? We can't just wait for law enforcement to fix this. We can't just wait for politicians to pass laws. We have to create cultural change. We have to make our communities places where violence is not tolerated, where women can speak up, where people can get help. That starts with each of us, in our homes, in our families, in our friend groups, Rest in peace, Courtney Reese. May your memory be a blessing to those who loved you. May your children know that their mother was strong, that she was brave, that she loved them more than anything in this world. May they grow up surrounded by people who remember you and make sure your light continues to shine through them. And may your story save someone else's life. May someone watching this recognize the warning signs in their own relationship and get out before it's too late. May someone recognize the signs in a friend's relationship and speak up. May someone understand that shame is not worth violence, that secrets are not worth lives. To Symmetria Edwards McCord and Courtney Reese, two sisters taken too soon, both victims of gun violence, both loved and remembered, may you rest in power. To Travis Edwards, a father who has endured what no parent should ever have to endure, we see you. We honor your strength. We stand with you. To those 4 children, you are loved. You are seen. Your mother's legacy lives in you. And this community is here for you. If this story affected you, if Courtney's case matters to you, drop a comment below. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep her memory alive and keep this conversation about domestic violence going. And to everyone watching, if you're in a dangerous situation, please reach out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. They're available 24/7. Your life matters. Your safety matters. This has been Unseen Stories. I'm your host. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this community. Stay safe out there. Look out for each other. And remember, silence protects abusers. Speaking up saves lives. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.